I'm Laura Bonnell, and this is the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast coming to you from Detroit. Please subscribe and even rate and comment on our podcasts when it moves you. I learn something new with every podcast, and I'm always inspired by the people that are showcased here. We don't give medical advice. You need to connect with your doctor for that. I hope that this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast educates you and sparks some volunteering or advocacy. The CF community needs people like you. Thanks to our sponsors, Viatris and Vertex, for their support. I have to start by saying this is a fun one. I mean, they're all fun and great. And, you know, I love everybody I do a podcast with. But Jon Gay and I go way back to our radio days. We worked at different stations, but in the same building, crossing paths, and everything built around deadlines and storytelling and finding the right words at the right time. And in radio, you do learn quickly how to think on your feet and write fast and talk fast and think about the topic and get the point across. So it is a great prep for the hot season of podcasts, which everybody loves to do now and which we are going to talk about. And I would say that neither one of us spent a lot of time trying to sound like a radio person and make it sound like the stereotypical, deep voice thing. We just made it sound professional and did our thing, and we'll get more into that too. It was very important to be credible, to be authentic, and to be conversational. That's all very important things that we're going to talk about in regard to podcasting. And it did become a natural next step for me as I, went full time with the foundation and started these podcasts. And we're going to talk about that in depth as well. And it is the reason that I was so happy to eventually hire Jon as a podcast editor. It wasn't something I could do in the beginning. So it's great to be where I am right now with our podcasts and with the editing and working with Jon. So this is the point where we get to bring him in and start talking about everything that you want to know about podcasting. And if we didn't cover it, let us know, because we're going to do a second podcast. And Jon, I'm so excited that now everyone gets to meet you and to know who is producing and editing this podcast, because unless people come to Education Day, where the first year I forgot to introduce you until the end.
I forgot about that, yeah.
Right? I was like, oh, who's this guy sitting next to you? So unless they hear from you, they might not know that, I'm not editing it myself and that it's you. So I think the first thing that I wanted to say is we didn't initially know each other in radio, but we both started in radio. So why don't you tell everybody kind of how you got started and why you thought, that's what you wanted to begin with in your career.
Okay. Let me see how far back to go without taking all day. So I went to Syracuse for undergrad, good communications school, and I got there wanting to be a sportscaster. I grew up in Boston, and I was like, I want to be the play-by-play guy for the New England Patriots. And I got to Syracuse, and everybody at Syracuse wants to be the next Bob Costas or Mike Tirico that went there. And I was realizing how cutthroat and competitive the sports broadcasting world was, and I didn't have it in me to work that hard at sports that sports watching was no longer fun. And there were two radio stations on campus. One was the sports station. They did play-by-play for Syracuse football, basketball, lacrosse. The other one was a student-run pop station, top 40 station. And I said, let me do this on the side. I was in charge of the DJs on the pop station before I was even on the air on the sports station. I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is what I want to do. So after graduating, I worked in top 40 and pop radio for about 15 years. I started my career in Burlington, Vermont, came here to Detroit from 2011 to 2012. Got let go for a budget cut, went down to New Orleans, ran a radio station there for 3 years, and came back to Detroit in 2016-17 when I worked for what was then 98.7 AMP Radio. You at the time were still at WWJ. Mm-hmm. So we were actually in the same building with 7 stations, and it actually never met face to face.
Right. It's a big building, and like you said, 7 different stations there. So it could potentially happen, but it's funny.
And so I got let go for budget cuts when a big corporate merger happened. And that was 2 weeks after I got married in 2017. And it was like, okay, now what? And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I thought maybe social media might be the way to do because I'd done a lot of that in my radio career. And then this podcasting thing was sort of starting. Again, this is like 2017, 2018. I got connected with a guy named Seth Ressler who worked for Jacobs Media. And I was producing and then co-hosting a podcast he was doing about the arts and entertainment scene in Detroit. He said to me, people will pay you to edit their podcast and produce it for them. And I said, you're nuts. Well, he was right. And so our co-host on that show, a woman named Becky Scarcello, a wonderful friend, she actually introduced us. And in, I believe, 2018, 2019, I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for you, Laura, because you were my very first client.
I know. And I didn't know it at the time. I don't think I knew it till probably
fake it
a
till you
year
make it,
later.
right?
Right, exactly. But it was fine. Like, we've definitely grown together for sure.
What's been great is being able to sort of test stuff out and do new things with the show. Like, we started off both coming from radio. We're doing an audio podcast. Now we're doing video podcast because video has really gotten big in the industry.
Before we get to that, though, I want to still say, like, okay, so we're both in radio, and I was doing television too for WWJ TV and stuff. So we're both doing that. Like, we know editing. I was editing my own stuff there. I was editing my news stories, had to edit everything, with a very strict, like, you're live every 29 minutes. So I had to edit all my stuff in the car and, in a news car or at the station or do an in-person interview and edit it really quick on a screen because that had changed, right? And was so fast at it. And it just came naturally, right? And then I think even podcasts, we weren't doing podcasts then. We were doing all these interviews and everything. And podcasting is different. Like, do you see that as well as kind of where you were fluent in this news, radio editing and kind of techniques, and then you have to make a switch to different timing and all kinds of different a rhythm of what we're doing?
Yeah, no, I think there's similarities and there's differences. So, I mean, in terms of similarities, I used, for stuff that I was producing, and I was more on the music side than the talk side, but for promos and, everything that wasn't a song that would go on the air, I was using a program called Adobe Audition, which is what I still edit in now. So the software for me was the same, but the context is different. To your point, especially on a news station where everything is timed to the second. This, even in TV, a sitcom has to be 22 minutes and 30 seconds to allow for 7:30 of commercials. The beauty of podcasting is it's a conversation, and regular listeners and viewers of your podcast will know sometimes the podcast can be 28 minutes and 7 seconds. Sometimes it can be 54 minutes and 3 seconds. It doesn't matter. It's just the time that it takes to tell the story. So there are some adjustments in terms of content. You may not have to edit it as tightly to fit in. You can let the conversation breathe a little bit more. If there's a tangent, depending on the context, you might leave it. There's a lot more freedom. And I think the beauty of a podcast is the intimacy of it, where, I'll use your show as an example. You're just letting somebody in the CF community sit in on a conversation, listen to that conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing we learned too is we learned together, like, just like what I said, like gum. So I was at first like, okay, maybe we want that stuff out, or if somebody sneezes, we want to edit that out. But if somebody's cat walks by, it's kind of like, okay, that's the human side of it. And it's kind of cool. And maybe somebody can relate to that. So we decided, we'll leave some of that stuff in. Well,
and it's funny. We'll go under the hood here because
sure,
everybody has different perspectives on things. And my instinct was to take out the aside about the cat walking by. And you had to tell me, no, Jon, I think that humanizes it, leave it in. And so we started leaving in some of those funny moments that, keep it conversational.
It does. And especially like those scientists who maybe they'll have a funny joke or they'll mention something, and that is the stuff I love. Or they'll happen to say, and by the way, I have like 10 cows on a farm or something that I didn't anticipate. Like, what? So keeping those things that they'll just happen to throw in are really fun and good to do. So I like that. And I think we've really, when we got Kevin Boynton to do the music and Kevin has cystic fibrosis, that was fun to add to the open and close. We really worked on that and brought that around too, don't you think?
Yeah. And the more people you can involve in the community, and again, it's a community and you're really tapping into your community. And I actually use you as a perfect example when I'm pitching to potential clients of fostering a community with this podcast. Is people are dying for information, especially, you talk to new parents all the time when they get a diagnosis, or people themselves who get a diagnosis, the patients themselves, they need information. Another one of my clients in a similar vein is the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link. They are a resource for folks who've undergone a bone marrow transplant after a cancer diagnosis. That is a terrifying thing. There's so much unknown. Your life is on the line. Folks in that community are just clamoring for information. And so in that podcast, we've had doctors, nurses, patients, social workers, caregivers, and it fosters that community. And that's the beauty of podcasting.
It is. And I also wanted you to talk about, I would say that I was very, you got me out of the being very radio-like, being very timed and saying the same thing in every intro, or saying something like, well, now we're talking with Jon Gay. You just got me out of having to say, or even the countdown, 3, 2, 1, or whatever it was that you had to do in radio all the time. I just needed to relax as far as, oh no, you don't have to do a countdown because I'm editing it. So don't worry about that.
Here's a perfect example. So in radio, if you're doing an extended 15, 20-minute interview, the reset is what they always taught us, where it's like, okay, every few minutes, somebody might be just tuning into the station. Okay, again, we're here with Laura Bonnell. Just to remind you, she's here. She's at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and all that. In podcasting, if somebody's either watching on YouTube or they've got it up on their phone, the title's right in front of them. It's on the screen. You don't have to keep telling people who the guest is or what the podcast is. It's right there. You can just sail through and have that conversation.
That is so true. And I was repeating, welcome to the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. I did that for a while in the beginning, which wasn't necessary either. So you have so many different clients. I also think you must learn a lot about so many different things. And you have to kind of keep track what everybody likes as far as editing or whatever.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to hit on that, I knew nothing about cystic fibrosis before I met you. And now I don't know if I'd call myself an expert, but I'm very well read, so to speak, in the topic, because I've learned a lot. Same thing with bone marrow cancers in the podcast I just mentioned. And I'm actually going to turn my camera here. I got these things on my wall called mix tiles. And they are.
Oh, you have us. I
see. You are. Yep, you're right there. There you are.
Wow.
With the new logo and everything. So, just looking at the wall. So I've got financial advisors. I have an esthetician. I have a resume and career coach. A chamber of commerce. I'll give a couple diabetes podcasts. 2 residential architects. A wellness podcast. The Death Readiness podcast. She's an estate planning attorney and she helps people get their affairs in order. So I've learned so much about all these different areas. I didn't know what a Roth conversion was until I started doing podcasts for financial advisors 6 years ago. Now I can tell you, oh yeah, Roth conversion. Let's go. So I've gotten to learn a lot. And, my wife's favorite phrase is be curious. And by being curious, I've learned so much.
It is great. I mean, I love listening to everyone else's podcast too. I do it usually when I'm walking, and
me too.
It's fantastic. And sometimes I do listen to my own podcast just because I want to hear, does it sound the way I wanted it to?
Yes.
And even though I listen to them before they air, because that's part of our editing process, but I still like going on a walk and listening to it, and just pretending that I've just discovered this podcast and is it interesting? So
that is a great tip. I want to stop you there for a second, Laura, because you're consuming it as a consumer. And I actually have a couple clients that, look, it's a physiological thing that you do not sound on tape the way your own voice sounds in your own head when you hear something. You're like, oh my gosh, that's how I sound. And everybody has that reaction when they hear themselves on tape or even on camera. I have a couple clients that they have somebody on their staff listen to the podcast because they don't want to hear themselves on tape. I love the idea that you are going back and listening because you're saying, you know what? Maybe I should do that differently next time. Or, you know what? I don't like the way I approached or segued between those two topics. Or, hey, there's, my voice was too low or too high or stuff like that. You hear it as somebody's hearing it, in their headphones on a walk or in the car or on their laptop or whatever. So I love that you do that.
Well, one thing I noticed for a little bit in the beginning was I was interrupting people. Interrupting them too much. And I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, sometimes it happens because I'm like, oh wait, I want to mention this, or I need to mention it right here at this point. Or they'll say an acronym and not everybody knows all the cystic fibrosis acronyms. So I will say it then, but I've learned a lot. And actually we did it in radio too. You always were listening or watching what you did in whatever show it was, because you had to make sure you were growing and learning.
Well, and the other thing too, related to that, is if you're having an in-person conversation, or it's a natural reaction to want to say, yeah, somebody's talking. Sure, yeah, oh, good point. Oh yeah. And so people, when they start podcasting, everybody does this. They do that. And a lot of times I'll take my little, razor blade, so to speak, and I'll cut those out because they're not necessary, because you're just having a conversation. Yes, you'll want to jump in every once in a while, but I might cut half of them from somebody who's just starting a podcast, because you don't need to say, because that can be distracting to the listener. You want to validate what the person's saying in a face-to-face conversation, but you want to hold back a little bit in a podcast.
And sometimes it's hard, because I do find myself doing that, because I feel like it's also feedback to them. I am listening, I'm here.
But you can just nod.
That is very true.
If you're face-to-face on video, you can just nod. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes in this podcast. What did you bring from your experience in radio that you brought to the podcast?
I love this question, and I'll tell you why. So my gig in New Orleans, I was not just a on-air talent, I was also the program director. So I was in charge of the radio station. And my favorite thing to do was what they call air checking, which is when you listen to somebody's stuff on tape from what they did on the radio and you critique it. And you say, hey, I love the way you did this. Next time try this. Maybe next time try this. We had a coworker of mine, Angie, who was just wonderful. She was young. She was hungry. She really wanted to be on the air. My absolute favorite thing in that job was to sit down with Angie and listen to her stuff and say, hey, that was great. On this thing, maybe try doing this way next time. Try making the point this way. And then we'd sit down a week later and she had done exactly what I suggested. And she'd be like, oh, wow, I see what you mean. That sounds great. That was like, I got juice from that. That was my energy. I love coaching people. And so that's probably the biggest thing I've brought is, I'm in a Facebook group with 10,000 podcast editors. There's a lot of people who will edit a podcast for you, locally, overseas, at all different price ranges. But I think my unique selling proposition is I can offer feedback on the way you're delivering the content, the way you're hosting. For some clients like you record it and I edit it. I do have some clients where I sit in as either a co-host or their off-air producer to say, Laura, you said 300 there. Do you mean to say 400? Or, hey, guys, we're getting kind of far off topic here. Like, let's bring it back around. And so I love coaching talent and helping them be the best they can be, especially when they realize that, oh, wow, this works really well. I love the way this sounds. And we have a really good back and forth with each other.
And that is a good comfort zone for somebody who may need that. And I wanted to go back to something you just said too. But before I go back to that, and it's talking about people who don't like the sound of their voice, but I wanted to ask you, I do love your feedback. Sometimes, as you know, I will email you and say, oh, this one didn't sound good to me. Like, what do you think? Or I went too long. Whatever it is, you have a different perspective sometimes than I had when I'm doing it. So sometimes I'll think I really bombed on this podcast and you'll say, it was actually your best one. Or you'll say, it sounded so good. Or I didn't get that vibe. So that kind of feedback too is different than you were just talking about, but really important.
No, and I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. But I think But an important thing for anybody who is a newbie or aspiring podcaster listening or watching right now, 100 times out of 100, you're going to be your own worst critic. And you're going to say, I didn't like that way that came out. And it's probably pretty good. I tell new clients, I don't have a single client that's gotten episode 10 that likes how episode 1 sounds, because you're always improving. Like everybody I know cringes at their first episode, but you're not going to be perfect out of the gate. It's always an improving, and you're always making tweaks. There's no blueprint. Like news radio, there's a blueprint. There's a clock to follow. You do all that. But podcasting, that's the beauty of it, is there's a million different ways to do it.
And with radio, I mean, we were constantly, and television, your package, your story, it can only go 24 seconds this hour. That's all the time we have. Or your TV piece, it's a minute 20 is all you have. You have 10 seconds for the intro. Don't even think about going 11 seconds. So you were just like following the law of time, of the clock.
So parallel to that. So in the music radio side, if I'm talking over the beginning of a Katy Perry song, I know I've got 14 seconds to get my point across. But I think what that training does, both on your side and my side, is it teaches you how to say something concisely. And the beauty of that is you can get the point across and move on and kind of let your guest be the star of the episode. You can say what you need to say and just and move on without belaboring the point.
And you know what I just found out? I just found out that not everyone knows that if you're a DJ on the music side, not everyone knows that there was a countdown clock.
There didn't used to be. It used to be you had to know it.
Wow, I was never around during that time. I don't know, I will say, like, I've always seen the clock is what I'm saying.
You might change. Back in the day, we changed the counter on the CD so we knew it was counting up instead of down. And I knew once it hit 9 or 14 or whatever it was, and then yes, at that point it was all on computer and it would count down.
Right. Then Katy Perry or whomever is going to start singing. So and so sometimes when I'm listening to a music station and they step on the first lyrics, I thought, how can you possibly do that? You have a countdown clock, so it is funny. And of course, I'm overcritical because I've been in the business, but
funny thing about music radio DJs, and my wife has learned this, is if we're in the car, we turn the radio up when the song ends because we want to hear what the DJ does, and we turn the radio back down when the song starts.
That is funny. Oh my gosh. And I'm always so critical of news too, because if someone says there are more questions than answers, I lose my mind. I can't even, it's like, that is such an overused stop. Don't even say that. Yeah.
So quick aside here. So by degree, I have a broadcast journalism degree. So my degree is in news before I got into the music side of things. And my favorite professor of all time, John Nicholson, if you're listening, I still talk to him 25 years after I graduated. But he had a few things that you'd instantly fail in his writing class if you did. If you referred to a fire as a blaze, he would fail you because you want to talk as somebody talks. And he would always say, if you're in a crowded theater, you would not yell, blaze! You'd say, fire. And the suspect fled on foot. Don't say flee on foot. That's redundant. If they fled, they were on foot. Like all these things. And even now, when I watch the local news, if somebody says blaze, I twitch.
And it's the same with all the police lingo. We know the police lingo. The victim is deceased. They're dead. Yeah. They have died. They are dead. They are not deceased. Like no one talks like that. Wow, my poor neighbor is deceased. No, he died. And I was going to use a swear word with that, but he died. So it's like things like that.
This goes back to your earlier point of what you bring from radio into podcasting. You want to speak the way a person speaks.
Exactly. Yes. And I was going to ask you because I guess my voice has never, or at least in my memory, maybe in the beginning, it was weird to listen to my voice on radio, but I don't have that recollection. I'm sure it was. A lot of people do say that. People that I do a podcast with, oh my gosh, I sound terrible or something. And I don't know exactly how to make someone feel better because everyone sounds great to me.
Do you want to know the science behind it?
I do.
I know you love the science stuff in these podcasts.
Yeah.
So when you hear your own voice, you are hearing it through the bone conduction in your ear canal and in your skull. And so that's how you hear and perceive your own voice, is through the bones inside your skull, which sounds a lot different than you speak into a microphone or a tape recorder or whatever it is. So what you hear of your own voice in your own head is not how the rest of the world hears it. So you can sometimes people at ease and say, what you hear in your head is not how your voice actually sounds, because of the physiology of the skull and the ear canal and the cranium and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes that helps me put people at ease. But or just say, you sound great.
And they do.
Yeah.
I haven't had anyone who I thought, geez, they sound bad. No one. Everyone's voice sounds great. It's their voice. It's their signature. It's the rhythm of their whole voice and everything. And then if somebody is saying a lot of or like, or, those are the big ones, like, that happens a lot. You take that out. We don't need anybody to sound like they are confused or stuck on words. We just clean that up.
Can I make 2 follow-up points on what you just said? So, one, if somebody is committing 30 or 45 or 60 minutes to listen to your podcast, I think you want to be respectful of their time as the listener. So by cutting out all of those, what they call disfluencies, you're making the podcast shorter, you're being more respectful of your listeners' time. On average, I probably cut out about 10%. And this is true of you and almost all my clients, you send me 60 minutes, it's probably 54 when I'm done on average. You send me 30, it's probably 27 when I'm done. What was my other point? Now I'm saying,
and that's okay. But this is also a good point of, if this happens in a podcast to a guest, you just edit out the hesitation or the, can we redo that, or whatever it is. So,
and I will leave that one in and not edit it out for that exact point.
Yeah.
That said, if you are interviewing an expert in their field, you want them to sound like they know what they're talking about. And they might get nervous when you put a microphone in their face. And you know this from your background as a reporter. Cut that out. You'll leave some because they sound natural, or you can't. Sometimes I'll leave one in because I can't make a clean edit, and you'll tell that there was an edit there as a listener. But let somebody sound authoritative in their space. It's still authentic. You're just taking out some of the nerves, or if somebody's searching for, their words at the time.
I know you and I could talk for a couple hours on what the business was like, is like, what it's going to be in the future, and all of that stuff. And I even think, gosh, I wish I had written a book about, from the police perspective, with Lieutenant Mike, whose name escapes me at this moment, and with myself as a reporter, and both sides. That would have been a really cool book of everything I've covered, from murders to weather to all kinds of stuff. It would have been really cool. But I want to ask you about the podcast. So everyone's trying to get into podcasts now. And I say, hey, go for it. Go for it. But what I find is, and this is why we did this podcast, so many people ask me. And for me, doing the actual podcast is very natural. It's who I am. And that's why I brought it into my foundation, because I am a news reporter, be it about Detroit or cystic fibrosis. So,
and you've said how many times on the podcast that it's your therapy too?
Yes, it is 1,000,000%. And I get to know all these people and find out things and share it with everybody that, will tell me that it's helped them. But every time someone asks me, I have to say, I don't want to give them the technical advice, because that's not my expertise. That's your expertise. And I don't have, I'm not editing anymore. And I loved the creative side of editing. But as you know, at first I thought, oh, I am going to do all the editing, because I was so fast and so great at WWJ and JR. And as you know, I don't have time. I don't have time to edit. I would spend all my time editing and then never be able to do anything else. And because you and I work together and have learned over the years, you know my style and I know how you work, and you always answer me within such a fast time that, it's fantastic.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So we have a really good work relationship, when someone asks, I want to be able to give them good advice on this podcast. Yes, I appreciate everyone asking me, and I think that we can give tips, but how do we get someone started who really wants to do a podcast? Do they start it on YouTube and do something simple? Do they start it with an editor like you? Where do they begin? Because I think it is different for everyone.
Absolutely. The hardest thing about starting a podcast is jumping in the pool and going for it. That is the absolute hardest thing because you're going to want to line everything up and all that. As far as equipment, you can get a microphone for $60-$70. That sounds great. I've got a list on my website, jagpodcastproductions.com, if you want to link that in the show notes. Starting a podcast is very intimidating, but here's a couple things to think about. And you, as you mentioned a moment ago, you and I could go on forever about the fate of radio and where radio is going. In radio, folks are fighting for pieces of a shrinking pie. In podcasting, it's much more the rising tide lifts all boats. Because in your case, say at WWJ, if they weren't listening to you, they might listen to WJR or The Ticket or a music station. But in podcasting, it's not this finite thing. You can listen to a podcast whenever, wherever. It's the internet. It's infinite. So I would say if you dig into the research, one of the intimidating things people say about podcasting is if you look that up, there's like something like 4 million podcasts out there. How would I compete with that? Only about 10% of them make it to 10 episodes and have put something out in the last 90 days. People are often one and done because they get intimidated, they find it too hard, they have a falling out with their co-host, whatever it ends up being. So people tend to walk away from it because it's hard. And I want to be honest with listeners and viewers here. I want to be the next Joe Rogan. I want to make millions and millions and millions of dollars. Joe Rogan was on Fear Factor. He was on a million things before he had a podcast. He was already famous before he started the podcast. If you want to start a podcast because you want to make money off it, if you want to sell it off downloads, it's probably going to take you 2 to 3 years to do that, doing it every week or every couple of weeks. You might have a sponsor that's in your field to do it, but you really should do it as either a passion project or if you're doing it for your business as a marketing tool for your business, a branding tool. I will say, as we mentioned in the disclaimers in this podcast is underwritten by pharmaceutical companies because that is a good match for you and what you do. I always tell folks, if you remember the joke about the college class of basket weaving 101, if you had a podcast about basket weaving, you might have, I don't know, at most maybe 100 people that want to listen to that. But there's probably a basket company that would love to be in front of 100 people that care enough about basket weaving to listen to a podcast about it. So if you're looking to monetize it, think about who you can partner with in your niche or in your field. But branding is the bigger piece of it. And in terms of the tech side, the platform that we record on now is called Riverside. It's riverside.com. They have a lot of built-in tools. If you're doing this on a budget and can't afford to outsource editing or any of the production, there's a lot of tools built into it for a beginner level 101 that you can do this all on your own. So I would say Riverside is a great place to begin. And as far as hiring an editor, it's time value of money. It's what is 1 hour of your day worth? And is it worth spending money to pay me or someone else to do the edit for you to do it in an hour or two to get 3 or 4 or 5 hours of your day back is how I look at it.
Absolutely. And it took us a while to get the grant funding. I mean, I'm just saying for people to be realistic and maybe you are the exception and it's all going to hit right away. That's fantastic. But I'm just saying that realistically, it takes usually a bit longer. So, so they decide, they're just going to start it on YouTube or they're going to hire somebody. Then I feel like, probably their first phase is they want to know about equipment and, where you go. And I have to say, it's pretty cool that we're on Spotify and everywhere, right? So wherever people get their podcasts, I love that. But another big question I get is about the ring light or the lighting. And some people I've seen with podcasts or even guests where it's so dark on their end, you can't even see them. The ring light is great, but I know another podcaster friend of mine, unless I'm wearing contacts lenses, which is not very often, I'm usually wearing my reading glasses, and for some odd reason at this moment, you can't really see the ring light in my glasses,
Depends on the angle, yeah.
It does, because usually I see it and it bothers me. I focus on that and it drives me crazy, but now I've kind of turned the ring light a little bit in a different direction, and then I've just gotten over it. Like, whatever. And I even told my friend who has her podcast, we're just going to have to get over that. But I'm sure you have a suggestion, Jon. So,
Look, coming from radio, I'll be honest, I started off doing just audio like when you and I started. And I dragged my feet a little bit on the video side because I'm an audio guy, I'm a radio guy, so I'm pretty much self-taught when it comes to all video things. But I had to, it's Darwinism, it's adapt or die. I had to start doing video or I'd be left behind. So there are, a million different lights you can buy. I do like the ring light is an easy fix for a lot of folks, or even just a fairly well lit room. And I moved in December, so I have a new home studio here. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set up so I have the windows in this bedroom right in front of me. So I'm going to have natural light on me. And then over time, what I've realized is depending on the time of day, sometimes it's too bright and I get washed out. So I have the shades are actually down in front of me right now, so the sun doesn't overpower me. And I've got one overhead light. See, you have the problem with the glasses. I have the problem of the dome. You can see the light reflecting off the top of my ball.
Which I honestly never notice. I mean, so it's also that it is what we're thinking, right?
But it goes back to the larger point of being a perfectionist about it. You can really, the devil's in the details and really just lose yourself in the details. At the end of the day, and this is true of video podcast, make audio the priority. Even if the video and the visual is not perfect, if it doesn't sound good, people are gone. The technology is there for it to sound good with, like I said, a $50 microphone, or there are AI enhancements if somebody's using a laptop mic. If a podcast doesn't sound good, that is a faster tune-out factor than it not looking good. Focus on the sound first. Walk before you run.
Great advice. And the other thing I would say to people is don't ask the same questions. Some podcasts that I've been a guest on, they're either like I always listen to see what their podcast is about before I'm a guest on it.
That's smart as a guest, yeah.
And I'll think, wow, they ask 4 questions and it's the same question to every guest. And if you're listening regularly, that's very boring. In most cases.
Start with the same question or end with the same question. It's what they call in radio a benchmark, where it's like an expectation. Okay, they always end with this question. They always start with this question. But yeah, what I tell folks is, some folks sound better reading off a script. Some folks sound better with bullet points. Have your bullet points. And this is so important, the old phrase, but God gave us 2 ears and only one mouth. Listen, and you might reorder your questions based on how the conversation is going. You might say, oh, they answered that question before I even asked it. You might say, oh, that prompts another question. I saw you taking notes as we're talking right now. It was something you were deciding to pivot in your line of questions today. And you don't have to be an expert. Just pay attention. Don't be, thinking about, what you get to pick up at the grocery store that afternoon. Really be present in the moment. Listen to your guests, and you'll be surprised what gold can come out of that.
And I have to say, this is ridiculous that I'm going to compare myself to Barbara Walters because she was the goddess of, radio and TV. But I will say one thing that in radio that I did like her was I didn't have questions written down. It's so easy. You just get this conversation going, and it should be a conversation, and then questions pop up. It doesn't mean I didn't do research about the person. It's just that I want it to be natural. So
yeah, and it's all about prep, and it's probably easier for you having your experience to go in without questions. But I would say, to somebody who's just starting out, doesn't have experience doing this, have some questions, have some bullet points. That way, if you feel like you're getting stuck, you can go back to what you already had laid out. And then as you get comfort, you've been doing this for years. As you get more comfortable with it, you might be able to riff more off the cuff. But just have them as a backup plan. It's sort of a safety net for you as an acrobat.
Right. And I do have questions, like I have written things down, and I do with something or someone who is so scientific that I may not know everything. So I want to make sure I'm saying the right thing or I'm getting their title correct. The other thing is that I like to phonetically spell their name if it's more complicated than Jon Gay, or, Smith or something like that. So it's really important to get their name right. We just did a podcast where I kept mispronouncing Chrissy's last name a million times in the podcast.
But I kept that when I did the edit yesterday because it was funny and it was natural and it was real, to our earlier point.
Exactly. So true. And then the other thing is, I think that I've learned from the guests are not everyone is comfortable coming on a podcast. They want to do it. They want to do it for me. If they know me, if they don't know me, they want to do it for themselves, but they need prep. So coming from radio, I always thought, you don't get prep. Nobody got prep. Like, the fire chief doesn't get prep. The police officer, they don't get prep. Like, if you're going to a news conference, even at the White House, they don't get prep. You just get to ask them anything because they're the expert and they should know all the answers. And if they don't know the answers, then they just say, I'll have to get back to you on that. So I really kind of did start hardcore with my podcast. Like, no, I don't do any prep. What do you need prep for? This is about you. And now I've softened a lot because people need an outline from me. They don't do it every week or every day like I do. So I do give people an outline, but I do say that we're having a conversation. So don't think that we're going to follow every question because even in this podcast, I do go back and forth. So sometimes it's like, oh, I forgot to mention that or ask you this. But I have learned that people need it.
And really, it's about making your guests comfortable. When I am producing and I'm on a call with folks, what I tell them is everything's recorded, nothing's live. You start to say something, you know, like the way it's coming out. I'll cut it. It never happened. Don't sweat it. I'll cut out your ums and uhs and likes and you-knows. And just making the guests comfortable. And even if that's kibitzing with them a little bit before you hit record, making them comfortable will make a night and day difference in the quality of the podcast before you start.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't remember a guest in all these years that I thought, wow, you really needed an outline. You did such a bad job. Like, that just doesn't happen. It's just, I understand it's a confidence thing because this isn't their mojo or it isn't what they're used to. But once they start talking, it's like, and they feel comfortable, it is the most beautiful thing. And I learned so much about Chrissy and Kristen in this last podcast. And I've talked about interviewing my husband about cystic fibrosis in a podcast during the pandemic. He told me more about what he thought about cystic fibrosis and raising the girls than he has ever said to me at any time.
That was a great episode, Michelle, yeah.
In a 1-hour podcast, I learned more about him than in all these years. What do you think it's about? It's just about opening up. I don't know if you feel like you're only talking to me or what it is, but it's this beautiful live book or something.
It's conversation. The oldest form of communication is the cavemen sitting around the proverbial campfire. This is just the 2026 version of that.
I love it. And it's history. I'll go back and listen to a podcast I did with Dr. Francis Collins in whatever it was, 2019. The first podcast I did with him. And I just thought, wow, that was such a good, I remember where we were, everything about that whole situation. So I love the history of it too. What else have we not touched on that would be helpful to somebody who wants to start their first podcast?
That question is right there. That is a go-to question in a podcast before you wrap up. Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't covered yet? Because a lot of times that will get you gold. I would say, like I said, the biggest thing is starting. Think about what your bandwidth is for the podcast. Think about, to do it every week is a huge lift, as you know. I would say for a lot of folks, it might be once a month or twice a month. But have consistency so your audience knows when to expect episodes from you. It might be the second and third Thursday. It might be the 1st and 15th. Think about what kind of cadence is reasonable for you. And you can call an audible. You can change as you're going through. But don't bite off more than you can chew. It's an intimidating thing. And a lot of folks, what I tell them when they start is we commit to a season. It could be 3, 6, 10 episodes, whatever that is. That way it's not this, oh my gosh, it's Thursday, I've got to do the podcast. It's one more thing on the to-do list and you lose the passion for it. Think about a finite number of episodes to start. Then you get to the end of that 5 or 10 or whatever it is, and you say, okay, John, or okay, self, this was fun, but I really don't have the time for this. Or, I really like doing this. I want to keep doing it. If you have a limited number to start, It's a lot more of an easy ask than I'm going to do this podcast from now until the end of time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's big. And then it's got to be something you're passionate about. Obviously, for reasons that are extremely clear, you have a passion for this topic. The old joke of, if you had to filibuster on the floor of the Senate for 24 hours and your life depended on it, what would you talk about? I could talk about podcasting for 24 hours without taking a break. I could pull a Cory Booker, no problem. But, you have to have passion for it. Now, if you're talking about your business, if you have a business, you probably have a passion for that or the field that you're in. If there's a particular interest, if it's a rewatching of a show that you really loved. I think the one thing trap people fall into is, my friends say my buddy and I should have a podcast because we're really funny. Okay. You might be funny in your inside jokes to your friends, but is that going to translate to a wider audience? And I think this is good advice that something they preached to us when we started radio. It's not about you. It's about the person listening. Put the focus on the person listening. Everything you talk about, put it through that filter. Are they going to care about this? And if the answer is yes, go for it. But the caveat, if you just want to do a podcast because you think it's fun and you want to do it and it's a hobby and you want to do it as an ego project, go for it. Nothing's stopping you. But if you're really trying to grow something and build something from the ground up, think about who your audience is and what you want to communicate to them. When I was early in my career in Top 40 radio in the mid 2000s, we were at a Top 40 station. We were targeting 18 to 24 female was our demographic. We had a cardboard cutout of Lindsay Lohan in the studio. Every time I turn that microphone on, does Lindsay care about what I'm going to talk about? Because if she doesn't, I should talk about something else.
And that is a really good point. And have real expectations. So,
yeah,
how much time are you going to be able to commit? Who are you really going to reach? Who do you want to reach? And the last thing, amongst women, either superficial or not, I'm not sure which, but some people, it's like the day I put makeup on is when I'm doing a podcast.
Sure.
And I do try and wear a different shirt every podcast. Not that it matters, because I've talked to other women who are like, oh my gosh, there's not a chance I'm putting makeup on for this podcast or anything. And it doesn't matter. I think it's just, for me, it's a confidence thing, or I feel like, okay, this is work, and so I need to do that. But I don't think it matters. But that's another question that I get to. So I think this was great. I think we'll do another one, and I'm glad that we went this long, and it doesn't even feel long.
Please know, Laura, that I appreciate you as a client and as a friend, both over these last several years. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something I'm really passionate about in your podcast. And if your listeners or viewers have any questions about podcasting, I'm always happy to have a conversation.
And all the information about Jon is in our show notes. And another reason you should come to our gala is because we're doing a live podcast, which has soared. People love it. They want to be on it. So that's your opportunity to join us. Thanks, Jon.
I'll be there. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical, The Science of Possibility, and Viatris. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.